Hi and welcome to this Sony PXW-X200 pros and cons reviews. I'm Rob from Online Video Solutions, and I'm really going to be going through the PXW-X200 with a view to all the things that I have found, both the things we like and the things that we don't like. And we shoot with these cameras in live events, so we have them on a tripod most often, and we're shooting live streaming, or we're live recording of seminars, events, etc. And so a lot of that's going to come from that. There's a few things that I'll mention where a colleague of mine from the US who uses it handheld has come across a few things as well. So let's get straight into the pros of the X200. The number one pro, I guess, of the X200 is the 3.5-inch type excimer CMOS sensors. Obviously these sensors are a lot bigger and therefore better in low light, which is definitely visible, as you'll see shortly. And it just gives you a far better picture quality overall. So really great. And as far as I'm aware, one of the few cameras in the world that's handheld that has 3 times half-inch chips. The X200 has really good low light performance. Here you can see a screenshot of the X200. You can note it's on f4, 0 dB and 50 shutter speed. And here's a comparison with the PXW-200. So the X200 versus the PXW-200, there again you can see the difference, and it's fairly noticeable. They're both on exactly the same settings, and the X200 is noticeably brighter. Here we compare the X200 to the X180. This is at full wide angle, so the X180 is slightly wider than the X200, amazingly enough. And when we go all the way in, there you can see obviously the longer zoom on the X180, but certainly the better low light performance at a similar range once the cameras have both been zoomed in. The 17 times zoom lens with the same f1.9 to f2.8 ramping. So the lens itself, as you can see, there's the 17 times optical zoom, and it's kept the same quality and just given us that little bit extra reach compared to the PXW-200 and all the other EX cameras. So again, here you can see the difference. That's the wide angle, and there is the X200 fully zoomed in. So the more zoom you have with the same quality lens, that's always welcome, and it's a great feature to have. On the X200, you're able to record XAVC at 50 and 60p. Recording in 1080p 50 or 60 is enabled by going to the others menu at the very bottom, going all the way down to System, ensuring that you have XAVC enabled. And then if you go into Format here and we go right to the top, you can see there's 2 options for long op 50p. There's no intra 50p, there's only long op recording at 35 megs a second or 50 meg in 50p. The X200 also has 3G HDI output, so that's 1080p 50 and 60 over the SDI. So if we look in the menu here and we go to video set, we can see here that the options are 3G SDI, HD SDI, SD SDI. So you now have the option to run 3G SDI. So that's 1080p 50 or 1080p 60 over the SDI cable if you so wish. Just remember that you must disable network and proxy. You cannot run the network and proxy option, otherwise it disables the 3G output. The multi-shoe interface is a great innovation from Sony. Here you can see a picture of it, and here again you can see the little pins. It's fully compatible with all cold shoe mounts, but it does allow powering and audio if you have the Sony wireless mic. So if we go into the menu now, we can see the options for the MI shoe adapter. If we go into camera set and we go right to the bottom, we can see that the video light, if you have the Sony MI shoe adapter video light, you can choose various options that will enable the light through the MI shoe adapter. So that's quite useful if you're using that particular light. If we go back out here and we go down to the audio options, you can see here if we choose now for that channel 1's external input, you can select between shoe mic and XLR. So you can do the same obviously on channel 2. So that's very useful to have the MI shoe adapter. Of course, there's no button, external button that you can enable the MI shoe adapter like the X180. You've actually got to go into the menu and set one of the channels to MI shoe adapter. The X200 has what I call 3 pseudo mics. Let's see how that works. So if we now go into the menu, we can have a look at what the 3 pseudo mic, as I call it, operation looks like. So if we go to audio input here, you can see that channel 1 and 2 are your external inputs. Now if you go in here and you select METADATA and you have the METADATA adapter plugged onto the top of this X200 and you have 2 mics plugged into XLR, what you could theoretically do is actually have this menu open. If this camera was on a tripod, for example, and you didn't need to look through the LCD, and you could actually swap between it doing this. And so you could have one METADATA adapter mic on top and 2 XLR mics plugged in, and you could swap between the two by doing this, or you could do the same on channel 2. So that's why I call it a pseudo 3 mic option. If you absolutely had to have 3 mics, you could do it. It's a bit of a workaround. It's not designed to work this way, but in fact it does actually work, so that you could have 2 XLR and 1 SHU and just swap between them. The 3.5-inch QHDC, the 960 by 540 LCD panel is really, really good. Here's a quick picture of it, and of course you can see the picture itself doesn't do it justice. If you see it for real, you'll notice that it's a lot higher quality than some of the previous versions. The X200 also has the steady shot button on the 17x zoom lens. There you can see it, and that obviously makes it a lot easier to switch it on and off if you're holding the lens itself. So useful to have. I'm a great fan of having buttons on the body of cameras. It makes it so much easier to activate different functions. The USB wireless LAN module comes included. So this is with the wireless module connection point. If we open it up, you can see that's what it looks like. And this is the little module that comes included when you buy the X200. So again, a nice feature. You don't have to go and buy that separately. Again, similarly with the rear cold shoe mount, that comes included. I remember when I bought the EX1R, it did not come included, and I had to go and buy it, and it cost sort of 25 or 30 pounds. So it's nice that Sony have now included that in the package. Near field communication, again, a useful feature if you have an Android device. There on the back of the camera, you can set it in the settings and touch against it with your near field communication device, and it'll pick up all the network options automatically. This camera is really solid and well built. At 2.87 kilograms, it's lighter than the X180, but the feel of the camera itself, it's sleek, it's just light, it's something you can take and run and gun with, put on a tripod, and it just works really, really well. It's just such a nice camera to hold and to use. I'm really, really happy with the camera. In fact, I have 2 of them. The X200 has got some really in-depth picture profile settings, similar to its big brother, the PXW-X200, or the bigger model as well. Let's have a quick look. So if we press the picture profile button on the side of the camera, we can see here that if we go in, we have 6 picture profiles, and if I go into any of them, let's choose this one, which is the one I normally use, and go into set. There's a number of different options that you can choose from here. And actually, when you set up the multi-matrix mode to multi-matrix as it's set there, and you go in here, all these options at the bottom here, the hue and axis and saturation, can be changed. And if you're using some kind of color chart and you have the camera plugged into a vector scope, you can actually tweak the vector scope to have the various lines fall on the squares, which is what I've done with this particular profile. So very useful, because you can turn the axis, you can tweak each one independently, which is very, very useful to get the exact picture profile that you're looking for. Again, a lot of detailed options in here. Many of them I don't use, and some of them I don't actually know how to use or see any difference when I do try and use them. What we do notice at the bottom here is that you can copy this profile to other profiles, because obviously you've got 6, so if you want to make a copy and then tweak them so that you always have an original, you can do that. And you can save the picture profile data to an S/S card, which you can then plug into another X200 so that you can match the 2 of them up. So very, very useful picture profile settings on the X200. The X200 also has a very usefully positioned focus mag button. If you have a look here, there my 2 fingers are on the actual zoom rocker, and it's very, very easy to move the index finger off onto the focus mag button. Compare that with the X180, which has got a different handle design. It's much harder to actually move your finger in and to tap the focus mag button, but very easy here on the X200. It's got a very responsive zoom ring in manual mode. If we have a look here, you can see that you crash zoom in and out. It's really easy to use. It's responsive. It just works extremely well. A lot better than the X180, which has got a noticeable lag on it, where here you can see it's very quick and responsive to zoom in and out. Again, it has a very responsive focus ring with end stops. If we have a look here, you can see You can move across as you move the ring back. You can go to one side and it'll stop and go across to infinity and it stops. And even the teeth on the focus ring has been improved on the X200. It's just easier to grip and works really well. And here you can see the focus ring being moved forward or backwards, depending on whether you want autofocus or manual. The wireless functionality on the X200 is reasonably useful, so let's have a look at that. So let's go into the network option here. You can see at the moment it's set to off. We've got USB-A, which is the little USB adapter, which at the moment has the little Wi-Fi USB chip in there. And we've got network and proxy. So this option here would allow you to plug in a USB to Ethernet adapter or a 3G, 4G USB adapter. If we go to network and proxy and we enable that, the camera restarts and we come back and you see this message here. If you have an MI shoe adapter, there's no power to the MI shoe when the network and proxy is enabled. If we now go in again and go down to network and proxy, we give it a few moments here and then we'll see all the options actually illuminate. It takes a few seconds for those options to become available. So if you're in a hurry, make sure you've got at least a minute minimum to be able to switch on the network and proxy. Switching it off is a lot quicker. It does, again, shut the camera down and restart it, but nowhere near as long as the time it takes to actually enable it and for all these features to become available. So there we go. Network and proxy is now enabled and we can have a look at the various options. This option here, the grayed out one, should become available in a moment, but we can look at some of the other ones. There we go. It's now become enabled and the options are access point, station, modem and wired LAN. So access point allows you to use the camera as the actual Wi-Fi transmitter, and then you can transmit to, for example, a laptop, PC, Mac, tablet or smartphone. And if you choose station, that will allow you to connect to an existing Wi-Fi network so that you can upload footage from the camera to other places. But you can also connect to control devices. So we'll leave it on access point at the moment. Then you can see there's streaming there, so you've got the option to stream directly to an FTP server, and you can edit the various streaming options here and choose from one of the different presets. So you can set up different presets here with different options, and then under the streaming itself you can actually choose which preset you want. So very quick from that point of view. You can also choose to record a proxy file on the SD card up to 32 gigabytes in the SD card slot on the camera itself, and you can remotely control the camera. Certain functions can be remotely controlled from a tablet or smartphone, and you have the near field. So again, if you have an Android phone, you can pick up the settings by just touching the camera. The WPS is sort of an automatic router. I've got one of those at home, and you can set that up and press this and it'll make a connection very quickly. But there is a way to connect to devices such as an Apple Airport Extreme, etc., that don't have WPS, but you then have to use a tablet to get those settings. There's no way that I've found on the camera itself to actually get those working. You can set the key, reset the key itself, and then it'll bring up the IP, etc. So reasonably good network functionality on the X200. So wirelessly transferring metadata to the X200. So let's now have a look at the wireless transfer of metadata. If we go into the menu and we set the access point there, we go down and have a look at what the access point IP, etc. is. There we go. We can see that it's 192.168.1.1. So if I now go on to the iPad, for example, and we go into the menu options, we'll see there is the direct connection with the X200. So if I select that, I've already inputted the password, so that's all set up. So we can now exit, and if we go into Content Browser Mobile, always hit the search button again, and then we tap on it, and we are now connected to the X200 directly via the access point option. So that's set. If we go down to monitor, and I open up the hood, you can see there that we are monitoring it. It is working. I'll just close that for the moment. You've got the option to browse. If I had any media, I'd be able to browse through that wirelessly. Planning metadata is the one that's very useful. You see it comes up with an error message, but if we click a touch on the top right-hand corner, we go down to local storage, you can see I've set up one. And if we go to the camera itself now, we'll see that it says cam 1001. So we now have this test metadata set up on the iPad, and we have the normal metadata on the camera itself. So if I now load that, if I touch on the load button and select slot B, let's say for example, you will see now that it sends the metadata to the camera, and now voila, if we look on the camera, it now says test 001. So you can in fact, straight from the iPad, send a limited amount of wireless metadata straight to the camera, which is very useful, because the old way of doing it was using XM Pilot on a Windows PC only. And while you could input a little bit more data there, it was a real clunky way of doing it. So that's a very, very useful feature of adding wireless metadata to the X200. So we've got a few other options here under job list and application list. There's not much happening there. Or under application list, those would be for uploads to a server. Device settings is quite useful, because this will show you what your settings are, and you can actually change, for example, the monitoring size that comes through onto the iPad or some other handheld device. I've set it to the maximum quality, and you can see the frame rate and bit rate as well. You can also go and edit the streaming preset, so you can go in here and edit the streaming preset, select perhaps a smaller size, or choose a lower or higher bit rate, and set the destination and port rather than having to go and input it on the camera itself. So we'll just cancel that. And then it also gives you the properties. We can go down to the proxy format as well here, and you can set the proxy format. You can also go to station settings, and here is actually where you can make the connection settings for any wireless LAN system. Because on the camera itself, it only allows you to use the WPS, which is like an automatic connection. But if, for example, you have an Apple AirPort Extreme or some other device that doesn't use WPS, you can actually set the SSID name and the key, and you can send that information to the camera. Then you can go into station mode on the camera itself. So if we went into menu and we went up to access point, you could then change this to station, and the camera would then make a connection to the wireless. So that's very, very useful for setting wireless connections with non-WPS settings. So again, very, very useful in terms of setting wireless metadata, but also there's a number of other features that the wireless option gives you through a tablet or iPhone or iPad or any Android device. The X200 comes with 2 times 1/4 inch tripod screw mounts. If we look underneath there, very, very useful, same as the PXW-200, but both of them are a lot better than the EX1 and EX1R, which only had the single 1/4 inch screw mount, which meant the camera could easily move around on the plate. But this really does secure the camera extremely well. So moving on to the cons. The PXW-X200's #1 con from my point of view is the placement of the AC power. If we have a look here, you can see that you have to actually remove the battery to plug in the power to power the camera for a long period of time. We shoot a lot of live events over many hours, days in fact, and so the battery won't last for us, and so we use the power, but we have to remove the battery. That means obviously it's a lot slower to take the tripod off, take the camera off the tripod, or if there's a power failure or any problem, somebody kicks a power socket, the camera will go off and the battery won't kick in automatically. So really, really unhelpful from Sony in this particular point, particularly because it was on the PXW-200. So they really should have changed this for the X200. There are some wireless limitations or quirks. Let's have a look at a few of those. So let's have a look now at the network quirks, if you like. If we go into the menu option and we go down to network, we can see it's off at the moment. We've got USB and network and proxy. So let's go and select this, and the camera will restart itself. There you can see a message coming up there about the power supply not being enabled with the METADATA adapter. So that's the first thing to note about the networking option. As soon as you have networking enabled, so if we go down here to networking, we can now see that the network and proxy is enabled. The first thing we notice is that if you are running a device such as a wireless mic kit and using the SMAD P3 adapter in the METADATA on the X200, it will not power up, so you cannot use it with network and proxy enabled. So that's the first thing. The networking mode itself is set to off. You can set it to obviously station, access point. The two other options that are grayed out there are modem and wired LAN. you need a different adapter that plugs into the USB connection on the X200 in order to use those. But we don't even need the access point or station enabled. So in other words, as it's set up at the moment, you can put an SD card into the proxy slot and you can record proxy media. However, there are some limitations. As soon as this network and proxy option is enabled, the camera disables certain other features. So let's have a look here. One of the features here is under video set. All the output options are grayed out, so you can make no changes to the output at all. It will only output whatever frame rate is running on the camera itself, and you certainly cannot output 50p or 60p over the HDMI or SDI when you have network and proxy enabled. So that limits your output of the camera itself. The other thing to notice is if we go to the EVF here, at the bottom there you can see that power is grayed out. And what that basically means is that you can set that to auto, which is the grayed out option there, which means that if you want to view through the EVF, you have to actually close the LCD. You have to turn it and close it back as if you were packing up the camera, and then the EVF will come on. The other option that you could have enabled if you didn't have network and proxy running is run both the EVF and the LCD at the same time. Unfortunately, there's no option to swap between the two with a single button press. There's no eye sensor on the EVF itself, so you can't bring your eye closer or your head closer, look through it, and the EVF will come on, like for example the X180. So that's definitely a disadvantage with the EVF itself. And with network and proxy, you now have even less options. You cannot have them both running at the same time anyway. You're forced to close the LCD to use the EVF. The other thing to notice, if we go further down on the menu here to the actual recording options, the format, so if we go all the way down to system, you can see there that we're running XAVC and we're running LongOp 50, 25p. There's no option up the top there to actually run 50p. So you can't run 50p internally in the camera either. So you can't output 50p or 60p, and you can't record internally 50p or 60p with network and proxy enabled. So these are some of the limitations to be aware of if you're going to buy this camera. The networking and proxy, even if you're not running networking itself, disables a number of features on the camera that you would otherwise use. The X200 has no LCD EVF toggle switch or assign button. So there's no EVF LCD toggle button on the outside of the camera itself. And if we go in here to the EVF menu, and we're going to have a look here, the only option we have to power the EVF is auto or on. Also, there's no assign button. So if we go out and we go down to the bottom here and we go and look at button assignments, if I go and choose one of them, for example, auto trace white balance hold, and I scroll through the list here, you'll see that there's no option to set up an assign button to the EVF, which really should be. That adjust there really just adjusts some of the settings of the EVF or LCD, but it doesn't allow you to switch between the two with a single button press, since there's no eye sensor on the LCD, on the EVF itself. So really a downside with the EVF. It's just not a great EVF in and of itself either. So here you can see what the EVF of the X200 looks like. This is being shot on a Panasonic GH4 in 4K mode so that I can blow the picture up to 300% to give you a better idea. The 12mm SLR Magic lens is pushed straight into the EVF, and you'll obviously see it being a little bit blurry on left and right. But this is essentially, if you're looking in the middle of it, this is essentially what the EVF quality will look like. And in my opinion, and a colleague in the US who uses the EVF a lot more than I do, the X180, for example, has a better quality EVF than the X200. So not a great EVF in terms of being able to focus that clearly or to give you good color reproduction or anything like that. Pretty poor, actually. The X200 only has 5 external assignable buttons on the body itself. Here you can see labeled 1 to 5. Those are the only buttons, whereas the X180, for example, has at least 7 buttons, and you can remap a few others. Here you only have 5. And not only have you only got 5 buttons, but you have a limited list of assignable functions for those buttons. So if we go into the menu here and we look under the assign buttons, we can see if we just choose any one of them, and I'll just scroll right to the top. Here's the list of options: zebra, peaking, you can set markers, last clip, auto a trace white balance or hold, rec record, the record button itself, etc. As I go through here, you can have a look. But this list really is rather limited. At least two things that we would like to see on here. One is courtesy of a colleague over in the US who would love to have slow shutter being able to be assigned to one of the assign buttons. And I would like to have the EVF on-off assigned to a button, because at the moment the EVF is rather difficult to use. This option here adjusts some of the characteristics of the LCD EVF, but not being able to switch between LCD and EVF. So really it is a limited number of assigned functions that are available for the buttons. The full auto, the rec record and the focus mag buttons are not assignable. So there's the full auto button. On some other cameras you can reassign that, you can't on the X200. And similarly with the rec record and the focus mag, neither of those buttons can be reassigned either. The on-screen iris indicator does not change. Let's have a look at this. So if you keep your eye on the f-stop number there, f1.9, this is at the full telephoto, sorry, this is at the full wide angle of the zoom, and if we zoom all the way in, you'll notice that A, the picture gets darker, but B, that f1.9 doesn't change. And when we've done a test, and some other experts on the forums talk about it, in fact, this setting here is around f2.8, so it does ramp up to at least f2.8, but it doesn't display it on the actual LCD, which is definitely a quirk of the EX range of cameras, because as far as I know, this has never actually worked. So if we zoom all the way out again, you'll see it become a little bit brighter, and the iris f-stop doesn't actually change. The X200 only has two optical ND filter positions. There you can see them, clear 1 and 2, and let's have a look at what they actually look like. So if we look at the two ND filter stops, we're at no ND filter at the moment, obviously very much overexposed. If we go to ND filter 1 at 1/8, then you can see what that looks like. And then if we go to 1/64, there's a significant jump there. And so ideally you'd like three stops, like the X180 and many other cameras have got 3 ND filter stops, because the jump between this and that is quite significant. So here are some missing features that I would have liked to have seen on the X200, and I'm comparing directly with the X180. So I'm going to show you a few things here that are on the X180 that I wish were on the X200. The first of them is the headphone monitor. You can see there's the actual switch itself. On the X200 you have to go into the menu to make any changes to the output of the audio coming into the headphones. The remote lanc on the X180 is compatible with most other remote lancs, the 2.5mm jack, whereas on the X200 you have this, I think it's an 8-pin remote lanc that's not compatible with any other cameras, only the EX line. So I wish that the X200 and its future versions will have the normal remote lanc. USB 3 on the X180 means you can connect the camera directly to a computer, and the transfer of data from the camera to the computer is a lot quicker. If you had to use the USB on the X200, it's USB 2, and it'll take you forever to copy over longer video clips. The power point there on the X180 is in the bottom right, as you can see, nowhere near the battery compartment like the X180, so I wish that had been implemented on the X180, probably my number one con of the X180. I wish the X200 had the external toggle switches to toggle between XLR and MI-SHU like the X180 has here. On the X200, as you've seen, you have to go into the menus to make those changes. The iSense on the EVF on the X180 is great. Unfortunately with the X200, as we've seen, the EVF is not great, but also the way to activate the EVF is rather cumbersome. So here's the EVF of the X180, and again, it may not be apparent in the video itself, but the quality of the EVF is definitely better. It's just sharper, brighter, just a higher quality EVF if you want to do focusing, if you want to check color, compose your image through the EVF on the X180. And the LCD on the X180 is also really good, comparable to the X200, but certainly the text on the X180 is just sharper and looks better than the X200, so I wish that had been implemented on the X200. Another useful feature of the X180 is the video signal monitor, as they call it. So if you look in the bottom right corner here, there you'll see the waveform, which is obviously affected as you change, for example, the iris. And we also have vector scope, although I'm not sure that's going to be much use. That's absolutely tiny. So again, and then of course we've got histograms. So very, very useful to have at least a waveform, I would say, because that'll help you adjust certain, exposure levels, for example, skin, etc. So wish the X200 had that. So that's it for this X200 review. I hope you've got something useful out of it. Please leave any comments you have below. And there's the link to the PXW-X200 specifications if you are looking at purchasing this camera. I'm very happy with the camera. I have 2 of them, even though there are a number of cons with the camera. It works very well for what we do, so I'm pretty happy with the camera, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much for watching.